The quiet drama, she told me. This house is mine now, at Grandma's funeral. I let her believe it for 30 days. Then the lawyer called. The thing about letting someone believe something that isn't true is that you have to be very still. You have to listen when they talk about plans that will never happen. You have to nod when they describe a future that doesn't exist. You have to stand at your grandmother's graveside in November while your aunt tells your cousin, loudly enough for you to hear, that she's already spoken to a contractor about opening up the kitchen, and you have to let your face do nothing. I am a social worker. Stillness is something I have practiced for a long time. I let her believe it for 30 days. Then the lawyer called. My name is Soren Adley. I know it is an unusual name for a woman. My grandmother chose it. She said it meant the quiet one, and she thought it suited me even before she knew whether it would. She was right. She was right about most things. She was right about my aunt, too, even when she wouldn't say it out loud. I should start at the beginning. My grandmother, Harriet Adley, lived in a house on Clover Bend Lane in a suburb called Whitfield Park. It was a 4-bedroom colonial with a front porch that wrapped halfway around the house and a backyard that backed up to a creek. She had lived there for 38 years. She had raised my father and his sister Claudette in that house. She had turned the 4th bedroom into a sewing room and then, later, into the room where she kept the things that mattered: photographs, letters, the quilts she had made over 40 years of winter evenings. She had told me, once, sitting on that porch in the last good summer she had, that she had always known what she wanted to happen to the house. She said she had taken care of it. She said I shouldn't worry. I filed that away. I didn't ask questions. It was her house and her decision, and I trusted her. Harriet Adley died on a Thursday in November at the age of 82, in the hospital, with my father and me beside her and Claudette arriving 20 minutes after, breathless and already crying before she reached the room. I want to be fair about Claudette. She did love my grandmother. In the way that people love things they also want to possess, completely and without awareness of the contradiction. The funeral was 4 days later. At the reception in the church hall with the casseroles and the paper plates and the women from my grandmother's Bible study standing in a group near the window, Claudette pulled me aside. She said, "I've already called the utility company to transfer the accounts." I said, "I'm sorry," she said. "The house. I'm going to need to move quickly. I want to get in before the estate process drags on. There are things in there that need attention." I said, "Claudette, it's been 4 days." She said, "I know it feels fast, but I've been thinking about this for a while. Your father is in Maryland and he has his own home. And I've always been the one who was closer to Mom. It makes sense." I said, "Has the will been read?" She smiled, and it was not an unkind smile. I want to be precise about this. It was the smile of someone who believes they are being patient with a person who doesn't understand yet. She said, "Soren, I know what Mom wanted. We talked about it." I said, "Okay." She said, "You understand, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to make sure we're aligned." I said, "I understand." And I did. I understood exactly. Here is what Claudette did not know. 18 months before my grandmother died, she had asked me to take her to see an estate attorney named Dorothea Klein, whose office was in a building near the Whitfield Park Town Center. She had the appointment already scheduled. She just needed a ride. I drove her. I sat in the waiting room for an hour and a half reading a magazine I did not retain a single word of. When she came out, she was carrying a sealed envelope and she said, "That's done," with the satisfaction of someone who has accomplished something they had been putting off for too long. In the car, she said, "I want you to know that I did what was right." I said, "I know you did." She said, "Some people won't see it that way." I said, "Some people rarely do." She patted my hand. She never told me the contents of the envelope. I never asked. I had learned in my work that the most important thing you can give someone is the dignity of their own decisions. She had made hers. I would find out when it was time. So when Claudette stood at my grandmother's funeral reception and told me she had already called the utility company, I did not argue. I did not correct her. I said I understood, and I went home and I waited. Because I had learned something else in 11 years of social work. The people who announce their plans loudly before anything is confirmed are usually the people who sense, somewhere underneath the noise, that things might not go the way they expect. Claudette was very loud in those 30 days. She hired a cleaning company. She told them to come the 2nd week of December. She called my father and told him she was handling everything, and my father, who is 64 and tired and lives in Maryland and has a bad hip and genuinely did not want to be involved, said thank you and meant it. She told her daughter that she was finally going to have a house with a proper guest room. She posted something on social media, and I saw it because a cousin sent it to me about new beginnings and honoring those we love by carrying their legacy forward, with a photograph of my grandmother's front porch. I did not comment. I did not call her. I went to work every day and I sat across from families in crisis, and I helped them figure out what came next, and I drove home in the evenings and I was still. 29 days after my grandmother's funeral, the attorney's office called. Not me, Claudette. I know this because Claudette called me 12 minutes later. I was at my desk. I was writing up a case note. My phone rang and I saw her name and I set down my pen. She said, "Did you know?" I said, "No, what?" She said, "The house. Did you know what was in the will?" I said, "I knew that grandma had taken care of things." A long pause. She said, "She left it to you." I said, "Okay." She said, "Okay." "That's all you have to say." I said, "What would you like me to say, Claudette?" She said, "I want you to explain to me how this happened. I want you to tell me that you didn't do something, that you didn't influence her." I said, "I drove her to her appointments. I helped her with her medications. I was there when she needed someone to be there. I didn't ask her for anything." Silence. She said, "I'm contesting it." I said, "That's your right." She said, "This isn't over." I said, "I hope it will be eventually." She hung up. I will tell you something I have never told anyone else about those 30 days. There were moments when I almost called her. When I almost said, "Claudette, wait. I don't know what's in the will. Don't make plans. Don't cancel the plans you already have. Don't reorganize your life around something that isn't confirmed yet." I didn't. And I have thought about why. Part of it was that I didn't know. I genuinely did not know what my grandmother had decided, and I didn't want to create a crisis around information I didn't have. But part of it, and I will be honest about this, was that I had watched Claudette walk into my grandmother's house at the funeral reception and begin assessing its square footage. And I had thought, she needs to understand that a plan is not a promise. That wanting something is not the same as being given it. That my grandmother was a person who made her own decisions until the last possible moment, and she deserved to have those decisions land with their full weight. The contest was filed. It lasted 6 weeks. Dorothea Klein had documented everything carefully, my grandmother's competency, her reasoning, the deliberateness of the decision. It was not a close case. The house on Clover Bend Lane is mine. I have not moved in yet. There is something that still feels unfinished about it, the quilt still in the 4th bedroom, the porch still holding the shape of her. I go on weekends to tend to it. I fix what needs fixing. I sit in the chair she kept by the window, and I watch the creek in the backyard, and I think about a woman who knew, in a way I am still learning, that the most powerful thing you can do is take care of something quietly and trust that it will hold. She was right. It held. I have a daughter, she is 7, and she calls the house the Creek House, and she asked me once if we were going to live there. I said I thought we might someday. She said, "Can I have the room with the quilts?" I said yes. She has not asked about anything else. Children are like that. They find the thing that matters and they go straight to it, without the noise. I think my grandmother would have liked that very much. The quiet drama. The quiet ones always have the loudest stories.